G'day, welcome to Plugged In Australia, episode 46 for Friday, May the 1st, 2026. On today's episode, Tesla's new Model Y L starts Australian deliveries with 6 seats, long range and vehicle to load. Leapmotor lays out a serious push to take on BYD, MG, GWM and Chery. And Chery's growing list of sub-brands gets even bigger, with iCaur, Lepas and Freelander all shaping up for Australia. We'll also look at Volkswagen's ID.Polo reset, Cadillac expanding its EV dealer network, GWM's cautious approach to larger EVs, the next wave of plug-in hybrids and range extenders coming here, the EV road user tax debate, and Zeekr's wild 1030 kilowatt plug-in hybrid SUV. Let's get into it. Tesla has started Australian deliveries of the Model Y L, and this is a more important model than it might look at first glance. At a distance, it is easy to write it off as just a stretched Model Y. However, for Australian buyers, especially families who have been watching the EV market and saying, great, but where are the affordable 3-row options? The Model Y L changes the conversation a little bit. The big headline is that this is the first Tesla sold in Australia with vehicle to load. That means the Model Y L can export power from its battery to external devices at up to 3.3 kilowatts. For Australian owners, that immediately makes it more useful than a normal family SUV. You could run camping gear, tools, a fridge, lights, small appliances or emergency loads during a blackout. And there's not a full vehicle-to-home backup like a properly integrated home battery system, and it is not the same as a Powerwall. However, for a Tesla in Australia, it is a major step because Tesla has been behind the brands like BYD, Kia, Hyundai, MG and some others on the V2L functionality. Pricing starts from $74,900 before on-road costs, which puts the Model Y L above the regular Model Y, but still well below many of the large 3-row electric SUVs already on the market. That is a key point. A Kia EV9 is a very good family EV. But is much, much more expensive. The Hyundai Ioniq 9 is coming into the same large electric SUV space. Premium options like Volvo, Mercedes-Benz and others sit higher again. The Model Y L is not as boxy or as van-like practical as some of those cars, but it brings a 3-row EV into a price band that more families can at least consider. Tesla claims up to 681 kilometres of WLTP range when fitted with the 19-inch wheels. But it's a very strong number for a 3-row electric SUV and around 14% more range than the current dual-motor Model Y range. As always, WLTP is not a guarantee of real-world Australian highway range, especially once you load up passengers, luggage, roof racks, bikes, camping gear, and you're cranking that AC in the summer, and then obviously the highway speeds. But as a comparison number, it puts the Model Y L in a very strong position. For Sydney to Canberra, or Brisbane to the Sunshine Coast, Melbourne to regional Victoria, or family holiday runs, maybe going to the snow in winter, or if you're in Sydney, going to the Hunter Valley or something, or the Swan Valley, depending on where you live, obviously, you may need to have some charging stops planned along the way. That extra battery and the extra range really do matter. The drivetrain is a dual-motor all-wheel drive producing 378 kilowatts, 590 newton-meters of torque, with a claimed 0 to 100 kilometre an hour time of 5 seconds flat, reaching a top speed of 201 kilometres per hour. Now, that is not Tesla performance territory, but for a 3-row family SUV, it is quick enough, and nobody is going to call it underpowered. The biggest story is not acceleration, it's how Tesla has packaged the extra space. The Model Y L stretches the wheelbase by 177mm and grows the body to almost 5 metres long. Inside, it gets a 6-seat layout with second-row captain's chairs. Those second-row seats have retractable armrests and can be adjusted through the rear screen or the physical controls. The third row gets its own seating space, cup holders, and access to the rear area. Seats can be folded from the boot, and Tesla quotes more than 2,530 litres of cargo space with the rows folded. Have gone and seen that Tesla Model Y in person, and the In the boot, it does look a little bit small with that third row up. However, it does have a false floor and does have quite a deep area there to put shopping and whatnot in there. So it's not too bad. I mean, probably a little bit of a stretch if you were going on a family holiday with a full car of 6 people, but it definitely is workable, and don't forget you do have that front space as well. Now that makes the car much more practical than the standard 5-seat Model Y for families with more than 2 kids. We've got grandparents regularly in the car, school runs, sport, airport runs, or anyone who occasionally needs 6 seats but does not want a full-size people mover. The interior also gets Tesla's premium audio setup with 18 speakers and a subwoofer, and there are 5 paint colors to choose from. Tesla has added continuously variable dampeners, which should help in the ride quality. That matters because the earlier Model Ys have been criticised in Australia for overly firm suspension, especially on rough suburban roads, patched bitumen, and country highways. A longer wheelbase and variable damping should make the Model Y more comfortable. However, local road impressions will be important because Australia is not kind to stiffly sprung cars. Efficiency is another big point. In early Australian driving, the Driven reported an average of 13.9 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometres during a Melbourne freeway run. That is very efficient for a vehicle of this size. If real-world owners can keep it anywhere near the mid-teens in mixed driving, that makes the Model Y extremely cheap to run for a large family car, especially on home solar or off-peak tariffs. Be very interesting because Tesla are not offering test drives of this car just yet. They should be available sometime in late May. So we just got to sort of go with what the journos are getting at the moment. There are a few things to consider though. This is still a Tesla, which means if you want a conventional dashboard, a driver display directly in front of you, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, or a more traditional ownership and service experience, the Model Y may still frustrate you. And just to be devil's advocate on those, you can get those little screens that you put in front, but people are like, well, it's a brand new car, shouldn't have to do that. True. And Apple CarPlay and Android Auto look like they should be available in these cars before the end of the year, so that'll be good as well. The 3-row layout is useful, but it is not a full-size van or Kia Carnival replacement. The 3rd row will be best for kids or occasional passengers, not large adults on large interstate trips. And while V2L is excellent to finally see, Tesla still has work to do if it wants to match the broader bidirectional charging promise starting to appear from other brands. However, overall, this is a significant Australian EV launch. It gives Tesla a genuine family expansion model at a time when the Model Y remains one of the strongest selling electric vehicles in the country. It also means the most important EV brand in Australia is finally offering external power output and may push the feature further into the mainstream. For buyers, the Model Y is not just a bigger Model Y, it is Tesla acknowledging that Australian families need space, range, price discipline and practicality, not just acceleration and software. Leapmotor is bringing one of the more interesting Chinese EV brands to watch in Australia because its strategy is very different from Chery, BYD and even MG. As we reported earlier, Leapmotor had already started appearing in the Australian conversation with low-cost models and future small EVs. The fresh detail now in is that Leapmotor is not just trickling in 1 or 2 cars and hoping for the best, it is openly benchmarking itself against BYD, GWM, MG and Chery, and it wants to do that with one global brand rather than a cluster of sub-brands. That's a big difference. Chery is going the multi-brand route. In Australia, we already have Chery and Omada JQ, and now Lepas, iCaur, Jetour and Freelander are all being lined up or studied. BYD is moving up market with Denza, and globally it has Yangwang and Fangcheng Bao as well. MG's parent SAIC is using IM for a small premium EV push. GWM has Aura, Haval, Tank and other brands depending on the market. Leapmotor is saying, nah, we're just going to stay Leapmotor. Thank you very much. That could be smart for Australia. New brands already have a trust problem here. Buyers ask, who services it? Where do parts come from? What's resale going to be like? Who is the distributor? And will this badge still exist in 5 years? If you then split attention across multiple sub-brands before customers even know the first one, it gets ugly. Leapmotor's one brand strategy may make it easier to build recognition, and especially if cars are priced well and the dealer support improves quickly. The Australian lineup is already started with the C10 and the B10 has followed. The B10 is positioned as a smaller electric SUV and is now listed at $37,888 before on-road costs for the style, with the longer range design at $40,888 before on-roads. Driveway pricing has also been used in market, with the B10 launching around $38,990 drive away. That puts it directly into the pressure zone with the BYD Atto 3, the Geely EX5, the MG S5 EV, Chery E5, the Kia EV3, and other value-focused electric SUVs. Leapmotor says it wants to cover about 65% of Australian vehicle segments within 3 years, with up to 6 models locally. That is ambitious. It would move the brand from a niche newcomer to a proper market participant pretty quickly. Sales are still tiny compared with the major players. In March 2026, Leapmotor sold 170 vehicles in Australia, and its first quarterly tally was 277. For comparison, BYD sold more than 7,200 vehicles in March, GWM did 5,600, MG more than 4,200, Chery more than 4,000, and even a Motor JQ did just over 1,000 vehicles. So let's not pretend Leapmotor is already shoulder to shoulder with those brands, because it's not. However, the growth plan is serious, and the product pipeline is the point. The next big one for Australia is the B05, or the B05, known in China as the Lepas 5. This is a Golf-sized rear-wheel drive electric hatch due here in the fourth quarter of 2026. Now that alone makes it interesting because Australia's affordable EV market is still very SUV heavy. The MG4 has shown that a well-priced electric hatch can work. BYD Dolphin has shown the same at the smaller end. However, there's still a gap for a properly sporty, practical rear-drive electric hatch, with the emphasis at it being at the right price. Then there is the B05 Ultra, which was revealed in Beijing as the hotter version. In China, the B05 Ultra uses a rear-mounted electric motor producing 180 kilowatts and 255 Nm of torque. It offers 2 battery choices, a 56.2 kilowatt-hour pack with up to 500 kilometers CLTC and a 67.1 kilowatt-hour pack with up to 600 kilometers CLTC. The smaller battery version is the quicker one, claiming 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 5.9 seconds, with the larger battery version, it weighs about 85 kilos more, at around 1,750 kilos, and is about 3/10 slower. The speed is listed at 170 kilometers per hour. For context, the regular B05 Pro in China produces 132 kilowatts and 175 Newton meters and is 8.7 seconds 0 to 100. The B05 Max produces 160 kilowatts and 240 Newton meters and claims a 6.4 seconds. So the Ultra's not a supercar, but it has a meaningful performance step over the standard car. The Ultra also gets Sino-European suspension tune, 19-inch gunmetal alloy wheels, staggered Hankook Ion Evo tyres measuring 225/45s at the front, 235/45s at the rear. It's got a more aggressive body kit, front splitter, rear wing, grey badging, and sportier colours. Inside it gets sports seats, faux suede trim on the seats, headliner and pillars, a heated steering wheel, massaging front seats, some yellow highlights, a 12-speaker audio system, has LiDAR-based driver assistance hardware, a 256-colour ambient lighting, and a panoramic roof with a sunshade. Very important. That sounds exactly like the sort of car that really could work here in Australia if the price is sharp. The MG4 X-Power has already proved that there is interest in fast, affordable electric hatches. Cooper Born has shown there is a market for more premium rear-drive electric hatchbacks, though at lower volume. A B05 priced right could land in a sweet spot for people who want something more fun than a basic commuter EV without spending Tesla Model 3 performance money. Leapmotor has not officially confirmed the B05 Ultra for Australia as yet. However, the global export boss has indicated it could arrive in early 2027 after the regular B05. Then there is the D19, Leapmotor's flagship SUV. This is potentially even more important for Australia because it is expected to be a large 3-row vehicle offered in both full battery electric and extended range electric versions. Now, it would sit above the C10 and the B10, and if approved for export, Australia is one of the markets being studied. The D19 is expected to target the sort of space occupied by the Kia EV9, Hyundai Ioniq 9, upcoming large Chinese SUVs, and possibly even premium family haulers at a lower price. Leapmotor has said the D19 is being localized for multiple export markets, including Australia, the Middle East, and South America. The localization process could take 9 to 12 months after approval, so this is not a tomorrow morning launch, but it's clearly on the radar. That matters because large SUVs are huge business in Australia. SUVs counted for nearly 2/3 of the Australian market in March, and even though large SUVs were down year on year, the category remains central to family buyers. A 3-row Leapmotor D19 with EV and EREV options could give buyers something cheaper than a Kia EV9, but bigger than a Model YL. The EREV option would be particularly interesting for regional buyers who like the idea of electric driving around town, but still want long-distance backup. There is also the smaller B03X crossover under consideration, and that would help Leapmotor cover the cheaper, compact end of the market. But one of the most practical updates is much simpler. Leapmotor is finally fixing its key problem. The current Leapmotor models rely heavily on a smartphone app and NFC keycard. That sounds modern, but in the real world it can be irritating. If the app plays up, the phone battery is flat, if it's raining, you're juggling kids and bags, or the keycard sensor is awkwardly placed, a normal key fob sounds very appealing. Leapmotor has now confirmed future export markets will get a physical key while retaining app and keycard backup. That applies to future models like the B05 and potentially B03X and D19. Existing C10 and B10 models are also expected to get the key in a model year update, although timing is still to be confirmed. It's a small change, but it's a very good one. It shows Leapmotor is actually listening to owners rather than just chasing minimalist tech for the sake of it. Australian buyers do not mind modern features, but they also want things to work easily in the Woolies car park, in the rain, at the school pickup, and when handing the car over to a partner, to your mechanic, or a friend. Now, what about a ute? Leapmotor says a ute or commercial vehicle is still on the table for Australia. However, there is one major problem. It does not currently have a ladder frame platform. Now, that is not a minor issue. Australia's ute market is dominated by tough body-on-frame dual cabs like the Ford Ranger, Toyota Hilux, Isuzu D-Max, and others. The Ford Ranger and Toyota Hilux alone sell in massive numbers. In 2025, Ranger sold more than 56,000 units, and Hilux more than 51,000 units. In March 2026 alone, Ranger and Hilux still stand around the 4,000 plus monthly unit mark. A Leapmotor ute would need to deal with towing, payload, dirt roads, tradie abuse, regional service coverage, off-road credibility, and fleet expectations. It would also need global business case support because Australia alone is not big enough to justify an entirely new ute architecture. Leapmotor has previously said it would need to stack up against markets like Australia, Mexico, Argentina, and Brazil. So the short version is Leapmotor likes the idea of a ute, and Australia would absolutely be a natural market, but it is not close unless the company commits to a proper platform. The bigger takeaway is that Leapmotor is moving quickly, but not perfectly. Its Australian sales are pretty small, its brand awareness is low, and it needs dealer and service confidence. However, the product plan is increasingly relevant. Affordable SUVs, a rear drive electric hatch, a possible performance hatch, a large family SUV, EREV options, conventional keys, and maybe one day a ute. If Leapmotor gets pricing, support, and quality right, it could become one of the next serious value players in the Australian market. But it has to earn that. BYD, GWM, MG, and Chery are not standing still. Geely used Auto China 2026 to show three very different parts of its future. A luxury-leaning Galaxy sedan concept, a serious new electrified off-road platform, and a high-efficiency hybrid system designed to take on Toyota. For Australia, Geely is no longer just a brand we watch from a distance. The Geely EX5 is already here. Zeekr is here. Polestar has a Geely connection. Volvo is under Geely ownership. So when Geely shows major new news, platform and powertrains, it is not just a China-only curiosity. It is a preview of hardware, design and technology that could filter into Australian market models across several brands. Now first we have the Galaxy Light 2.0 concept. This is a premium looking sedan concept under the Geely's Galaxy brand, and it is clearly trying to push the design language beyond basic value transport. The front end uses an illuminated grille design called the Starfall grille, with slim lighting, a low nose, and proportions that look more luxury sedan than budget EV. The concept also uses coach doors, dramatic tail lights described as dawning sun lighting, and a cabin inspired by Yangtze's West Lake. Inside, the concept is properly lounge-like, with 4 individual seats, ambient lighting, multi-zone climate control and air purification. It is not the kind of cabin you expect from older perceptions of Chinese cars, and that is really the point. Geely is using concepts like this to say, hey, we're not just building affordable EVs, we are building design-led, premium-feeling vehicles that can challenge established brands. The Galaxy Light 2.0 may preview the next generation Starshine 6, which is expected to use electrified powertrains, including Geely's EM-i plug-in hybrid technology and new hybrid system. If that sort of design direction flows into future export models, it could matter for Australia, because we are seeing Chinese brands move from cheap alternative to better equipped for the money, to increasingly, why would I pay more for an old badge? It's all about the value for money. The second and more Australian relevant reveal is Geely's new energy off-road architecture. Now, this platform is designed for electrified off-road vehicles and is expected to underpin models like the Galaxy Cruiser. Four-wheel drive uses AI-based torque distribution, all-terrain drive modes, one-touch recovery functions, and active posture adjustment. The battery is recessed into the structure to reduce cabin intrusion and is protected by a 6-layer base. That is the sort of detail that matters if you are trying to convince off-road buyers that an electrified vehicle can handle rocks, ruts, water, corrugations, and impacts. That platform can handle a tri-motor layout, producing more than 1,000 horsepower, or about 745 kilowatts. Geely claims 0 to 100 kilometres per hour acceleration in the 4-second range, which is pretty wild for something pitched as an off-road platform. But the more important bit is how the rear motors can be used. The system can engage a kind of rear differential lock by coordinating the dual rear motors, and the platform using double wishbone suspension, front and rear. It also has off-road focused thermal management, which is important because electric drivetrains and batteries can generate some serious heat when climbing slowly under heavy load. For Australia, this is the kind of architecture that could become very relevant. We're about to see a lot more electrified off-roaders. Got the BYD Shark 6, the Denza B5, the GWM Tank plug-in hybrid, Chery iCaur, the GAC utes, and the JAC plug-in utes, and probably more to come. Traditional four-wheel drive buyers will not accept EVs or plug-in hybrids just because they are fast in a straight line. They need underbody protection, thermal durability, battery safety, ground clearance, towing recovery points, proper off-road drive modes, and service support outside of major capital cities. Geely seems to understand that. The platform sounds like it is being engineered for proper use, not just SUV styling. The third reveal is Geely's iHEV system. Now, this is where we need to be clear. This is not necessarily plug-in hybrid news in the same way as an EREV or plug-in hybrid with a big usable battery, and we do not focus on this show on ordinary hybrids. However, the technology matters because Geely is directly targeting Toyota-style efficiency, and Geely already sells electrified vehicles in markets that matter to Australia. The iHEV system is based around a 1.5 litre petrol engine with a claimed 48.4% thermal efficiency. Geely says it delivers fuel consumption about 12% lower than a benchmark competitor, and in real-world testing it claimed 2.2 litres per 100 kilometres. Combined output is listed at 230 kilowatts, and the system can operate in pure electric mode up to 66 kilometers per hour. Geely also claims extensive durability testing, including 15,000 hours and the equivalent of 4.8 million kilometers. Again, for our show, the most interesting version of this technology would be when it is used in a plug-in or range extender applications rather than ordinary hybrids. Not a big fan of plug-in hybrids as it is, let alone regular hybrids, but it shows the direction. It does. Chinese brands are not just throwing batteries into cars, they're also trying to beat Toyota at efficiency, beat European brands on tech, and beat traditional four-wheel drive brands on electrified off-road hardware. For Australian buyers, that means the next few years will not just be EV versus petrol. It will be much more complicated with a mix of BEVs, plug-in hybrids, EREVs, and unfortunately high-efficiency hybrids, with Chinese brands pushing extremely hard across every part of the market. Cadillac is preparing to expand its EV dealer network across Australia and New Zealand, and that is a necessary move if the brand wants to be taken seriously beyond a small premium niche. Cadillac relaunched in this part of the world as an EV-only brand led by the Lyriq. It opened its Sydney Experience Centre in Rosebery in late 2024, started deliveries in early 2025, then added a Port Melbourne test drive venue and an Auckland site. Brisbane was planned but had not yet been opened at the time of the latest update. Now, Cadillac says it wants more locations and more ways for customers to experience the cars. That matters because the original model was very boutique. Boutique can work for a supercar or very low volume, ultra luxury brand. However, if Cadillac wants to sell meaningful numbers of EVs, especially large SUVs, it needs physical touchpoints. Australian buyers spending $80,000 to $100,000 or more generally want to see the car, sit in it, drive it, talk to someone, and know where it will be serviced. Cadillac's approach is also changing from company-owned experience centres only to a broader dealer model. The brand is still separate from GMSV, which sells vehicles like the Chevrolet Silverado and Corvette, but is now looking at additional retail partners and locations. Melbourne and Brisbane are the obvious targets, with Sydney and Auckland already active. The product range is expanding too. The Lyriq launched as the Hero model and originally sat at $122,000 before on-road costs, but the pricing has been repositioned heavily, with examples advertised around the $95,000 drive away in Sydney. That's a very big shift. It suggests Cadillac either needed to sharpen the offer, move stock, or respond to a premium EV market that is becoming much more competitive. The Optiq is the smaller incoming SUV, uses a dual motor all-wheel drive setup producing 224 kilowatts, 480 newton meters of torque, and pricing starts at around $80,000 before on-road costs. That puts it into the same broad premium EV SUV space as the BMW iX1 and iX2, Mercedes EQA and EQB, Audi Q4 e-tron, the Volvo EX40, Polestar models, and some of the higher grade Chinese rivals. The Vistiq is the three-row electric SUV, and it is priced from around $116,000 before on-road costs, with a dual-motor all-wheel drive system producing 445 kilowatts, 880 newton meters of torque. It uses a 91 kilowatt-hour NMC battery and has a claimed 461 kilometers of WLTP range. It's decent, but it's not class-leading. The Kia EV9, Hyundai Ioniq 9, the Volvo EX90, and even the Tesla Model Y L will all be part of the broader comparison, depending on price and buyer priorities. Cadillac's challenge in Australia is not whether the cars are interesting. They are. The Lyriq looks distinctive. The Vistiq gives Cadillac a proper, large family EV, and the Optiq gives it a more accessible entry point. The challenge is brand trust and network. Australian buyers know BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Audi, Lexus, Volvo, and Porsche. They increasingly know Tesla, BYD, Polestar, and Genesis. Cadillac is a famous American name, but it has been absent from Australia as a regular right-hand drive brand for a very long time. People may admire it, but admiration does not automatically become a $100,000 purchase. The dealer expansion is therefore essential. It gives the brand a better chance of converting curiosity into test drives and test drives into orders. It also gives existing owners more confidence about servicing, support, and resale. The hard truth is Cadillac cannot just rely on American luxury appeal. In Australia, premium EV buyers are spoilt for choice, and Chinese premium brands are coming fast. Cadillac needs competitive pricing, proper local support, good charging and software integration, and a network that feels real. If it gets that right, Cadillac could carve out a distinctive space. American design, full EV commitment, large SUVs, strong performance, and a different flavour from the German brands. However, the next step has to be visibility. More locations are not just nice to have, they are probably the difference between Cadillac being a curiosity and becoming a genuine premium EV player here in Australia. GWM has been very open about its view that full EVs make the most sense at the smaller end of the market, at least for now. That is an interesting position because GWM is not anti-electrification, far from it. In Australia, GWM already sells hybrids and plug-in hybrids. It has the Aura EV, it has the tank plug-in hybrid models, and it has a growing electrified lineup globally. However, when it comes to full battery electric vehicles, GWM has been more cautious than BYD, MG, or even Chery. GWM's Jack Way has explained that Aura was originally created around smaller, city-focused EVs. The logic is simple. Smaller EVs need smaller batteries cost less, smaller batteries weigh less, and city buyers often do not need enormous range. In that context, EVs make plenty of sense. A small electric hatch or small electric SUV used for commuting, school runs, shopping, and suburban driving can be extremely efficient and cheap to run. The hard truth is that big EVs are harder. A large electric SUV or ute needs a much bigger battery to deliver acceptable range, and that means more cost and weight. If the vehicle also needs towing, off-road capability, long-distance touring and fast charging, the engineering becomes more expensive again. That is why GWM has pushed plug-in hybrids hard in larger off-roaders and utes. A tank plug-in hybrid or Canon Alpha plug-in hybrid can give strong electric driving range around town, however still carry a combustion engine for long trips and towing. That strategy makes sense for Australia. We have huge distances, lots of regional driving, plenty of towing, and many buyers who want one vehicle to do everything. A large full EV can absolutely work here, but it needs strong range, good charging, high-speed DC capability, and often a pretty big battery. That pushes the price up. But GWM also knows it cannot stay too conservative. BYD already has multiple EVs here. MG has a growing EV range. Chery is expanding fast. Geely is here with the EX5. Tesla remains strong. If GWM only sells one funky Aura hatch as its core EV offering, it will look very underdone. That is why GWM is promising more conventionally styled EVs. The Aura 5 crossover is part of that shift, and the Haval Jolyon Max is expected to arrive in Australia with electric power later this year, making it the first non-Aura GWM model here to offer a full electric powertrain. Depending on market and final spec, the Jolyon Max will also be offered with petrol and hybrid options. This is important because the old Aura hatch has personality, but its styling is not for everyone. Some buyers love the retro look, others look at it and immediately decide it is too cute, too unusual, or just too small. A more conventional electric SUV under the Haval brand could reach a much broader Australian audience. GWM has also shown a large electric flagship under its Way brand. The Way V9X, measuring around 5.2 to 5.3 metres long. However, that model is expected to launch first as a plug-in hybrid, and GWM has not released full electric specifications. That tells you where the brand's priorities are. Smaller EVs first, larger electrified SUVs more likely as hybrids or plug-in hybrids first. That is not necessarily a bad strategy. Not every brand needs to chase the same full-size EV formula immediately. GWM is strong in value, SUVs and off-roaders. Plug-in hybrid versions of those vehicles may be more relevant to many Australian families and regional buyers than a very expensive large battery electric vehicle. However, the risk is that GWM gets outpaced. BYD is moving fast, Chery is multiplying brands, and Geely has strong platforms. You've got MG, it's broadening its EV range. Tesla keeps cutting through. If EV battery prices continue falling and charging improves, the excuse for not having more mainstream EV SUVs becomes weaker every year. So, GWM's position is realistic, but it is also a balancing act. Small EVs are efficient and logical. Plug-in hybrids make sense for bigger vehicles right now. However, Australian buyers are moving quickly. And if GWM wants to stay near the front of the Chinese pack here, it needs those more conventional EVs sooner rather than later. Chery's Australian expansion is starting to look less like a normal model rollout and more like a full brand invasion. As we reported earlier, Chery is not just bringing more Chery branded cars, it is building a multi-brand strategy for Australia. We already have Chery and Omoda JQ. Now Lepas is coming, iCaur is coming, J-Tour has been discussed, and Freelander is being revived through the Chery Jaguar Land Rover joint venture. The fresh detail now is that we are getting a clearer picture of what these brands will actually do. So let's start with Lepas. Lepas is positioned as a more premium design-led Chery brand, and it is expected to launch in Australia around mid to late 2026. Chery has shown the Lepas L4 and Lepas L6 electric SUVs at Auto China, with the broader Lepas family expected to use names from L1 through L9, increasing in size as the number goes up. The Lepas L4 is the smaller one. It's about 4,406mm long, 1,820mm wide, 1,635mm tall, with a 2,700mm wheelbase. That makes it larger than a Toyota Yaris Cross, but still in the small SUV zone. It shares underpinnings with the Chery Tiggo 4, and while a petrol version has already been shown overseas with a 1.5-litre turbo engine, the Beijing reveal gave us our first proper look at the EV direction. Exact L4 EV specs are still not locked in for Australia, but it may share components with the JQ J5 EV. That would mean something around 155 kilowatts, a 61.1 kilowatt hour LFP battery, and about 402 kilometers of WLTP range. If Chery can price that correctly, it could become a style-focused alternative to the BYD Atto 2, GWM Aura 5, MG S5 EV, the Chery E5 and the Geely EX5, depending on size and positioning. The Lepas L6 is bigger, closer to a RAV4 in size. Earlier details point to a 67 kilowatt hour battery and around 435 kilometers of WLTC range. That puts it in the heart of Australia's most important SUV market. If the L6 arrives with competitive pricing, enough range and a decent dealer network, it could matter more than the L4 because medium SUVs are where Australian families spend serious money. Then there is iCaur. This is the one that will get attention from the off-road and adventure crowd. iCaur is confirmed for Australia from February 27 with the V27 and the V25 SUVs coming. The smaller V23 is expected later, possibly 2028 or 2029 after it gets a facelift. The iCaur V27 is the headline car. It has boxy styling with clear inspiration from vehicles like the Ford Bronco, the Land Rover Defender, and the Mercedes-Benz G-Class, an old G-Wagon. It has squared-off bodywork, conventional door handles, a side-hinged tailgate, a full-size spare wheel on the rear, and a rugged stance. It's not very subtle, kind of the point. The V27 measures 4,909mm long, 1,976mm wide, 1,855mm tall, with a 2,910mm wheelbase. That makes it a large SUV, but not quite as huge as some full-size off-roaders. Powertrain details for Australia are still to be finalised, but in China the V27 is expected with range-extended hybrid technology. A 1.5-litre turbo petrol engine works as part of the system and reports battery options around the 34 kilowatt hours and 20 kilowatt hours depending on the version. Maximum power is quoted up to 335 kilowatts with a 0 to 100 km per hour time of 5.5 seconds. Chinese market claims include up to 210 kilometers of electric range and as much as 1,200 kilometers of total range. Those Chinese range figures will need to be treated carefully. CLT-style numbers are often much more optimistic than WLTP, and real Australian highway use will be lower again. But the concept is very appealing. Daily electric driving, long-distance petrol back touring, a rugged body and enough performance to make old-school four-wheel drives look pretty slow. Inside, the V27 is expected to use a 15.4-inch infotainment display. Got the Qualcomm 8295P processing unit. It's going to have physical buttons, an 8.8-inch digital instrument cluster, and a 4-pane sunroof. Chinese market versions may offer LiDAR and Level 2 plus driver assistance, but Australian models could drop some of that equipment depending on cost and local compliance. The hard truth is that the V27 may look like a serious off-roader, but it will need to prove itself. Towing is expected around 1.6 tonne, which is well below something like the Denza B5, which sits at around 3 tonne. Reports suggest it may be aimed at more of a lifestyle and light off-road use than an extreme touring. That is not necessarily a problem, but Australian buyers would need some clarity. If it looks like a Defender, people will ask Defender questions. Things like approach angle, departure angle, ground clearance, weighting depth, underbody protection, tyre size, recovery points, roof payload, towing, and what are your service coverage areas like in regional areas. The V25 is expected to follow, also with hybrid and range extender options, and with two-wheel drive and all-wheel drive variants depending on the spec. An iCaur ute is considered unlikely because Chery already has other ute plans, including a KP31 plug-in diesel hybrid ute later this year. Then comes the Freelander. This is one of the more unusual brand revivals because Freelander used to be a Land Rover model name. Through the Chery Jaguar Land Rover joint venture, it is being revived as a new electrified brand. The first model is expected to be the Freelander 8, a large SUV over 5 metres long. It is expected to offer battery electric, plug-in hybrid and EREV versions with dual motor all-wheel drive options and the next generation of batteries. Australian timing for this one is likely to be in 2027, though final details are still developing. So what does this all mean? It means Chery is trying to cover almost every buyer type. Chery for mainstream value, a Motor JQ for style and semi-premium SUVs, Lepas for design-led, younger or more personal EVs and hybrids, iCaur for rugged electrified adventure SUVs, and Freelander for more premium electrified SUVs with a heritage-linked name. That is aggressive. It could work because Australia likes SUVs, likes value, and is increasingly open to Chinese brands, but it could also get very confusing very quickly. Buyers may ask why there are so many Chery-related brands, who services what, whether parts are shared, whether resale will hold up. The opportunity is huge. The risk is brand overload. For Australian EV and plug-in hybrid buyers, the good news is choice. More electric and range extender off-road SUVs, more small electric SUVs, more medium family SUVs, and more competition should put pressure on price and equipment. But launching brands is easy. Supporting them in Penrith, in Dubbo, in Townsville, in Perth, Hobart, and regional Australia over 10 years is going to be the real test. Volkswagen has revealed the direction of the ID.Polo, and this is more than just a small electric hatch. It is Volkswagen admitting that its EV strategy needed a reset. The ID.Polo is expected to be the production version of the ID.2 All concept and will sit as a compact front-wheel drive electric hatch for Europe. The big change is the name. The Volkswagen is moving away from the anonymous number-only EVs and bringing back familiar badges. Polo means something to buyers, Golf means something, Tiguan means something, ID3, ID4 and ID5 might make sense inside a product planning office, but they do not carry the same emotional value. The ID.Polo is expected to launch in Europe in 2026 with pricing targeted under €25,000. That is important because Europe desperately needs more affordable EVs, and Volkswagen needs to show it can compete with lower-cost Chinese brands without abandoning profitability. The car is around 4,054mm long, which keeps it firmly in the compact hatch class. It uses Volkswagen's updated MEB-based small EV architecture and is expected with front-wheel drive. Reported power outputs include around 114 horsepower, 133 horsepower and 203 horsepower for mainstream versions, with a hotter ID.Polo GTI expected in 2027, producing around 223 horsepower. Battery options are expected to include a 37 kilowatt-hour LFP pack, good for around 204 miles WLTP, and a larger 52 kilowatt-hour NMC pack, good for around 282 miles. Converting that to kilometres, that's about 328 kilometres and 454 kilometres respectively. For a small city and suburban EV, that is useful range. It's not a long-distance touring car, but it does not need to be. The interior is just as important as the drivetrain because Volkswagen has been hammered for its recent touch-heavy cabins. As we reported earlier with the ID.3 Neo story, Volkswagen has already been moving back toward better usability. The ID.Polo makes that reset clearer. It gets a 13-inch central touchscreen, a 10-inch digital instrument display, but also physical controls for major functions like temperature and fan speed. Steering wheel buttons return instead of the annoying capacitive touch sliders that frustrated so many owners. That matters. Australian drivers do not want to dig through a touchscreen just to adjust the air conditioning on a hot day or change a basic setting while driving. Volkswagen built its reputation on cars that were easy to understand, solidly made and intuitive. The ID.Polo looks like a return to that sort of thinking. There are premium touches available too, including ambient lighting, optional massaging seats and upgraded audio. But the real story is normality. A familiar name, useful range, smaller batteries, physical buttons, front-wheel drive, and a practical hatchback shape. Will it come to Australia? That's the big question. There is no locked-in Australian launch at this stage. Volkswagen Australia has historically struggled with the business case for smaller European EVs because of the right-hand drive production, the shipping cost, exchange rates, Australian design rules, and pricing pressure from Chinese brands. The ID.3 still has not become a mainstream Australian showroom fixture, and Volkswagen has focused more heavily on the ID.4, ID.5 and commercial vehicles. But Australia needs cars like the ID.Polo. Not everyone wants a big SUV. Not everyone needs 600 kilometres of range. Plenty of people want a small, efficient, safe, well-built EV for commuting, school runs, inner city parking, or even second car duty with some nice low running costs. The challenge is price. If an ID.Polo came to Australia at European exchange rate fantasy pricing, it would need to land close enough to the BYD Dolphin, MG4, GWM Aura, Chery and other affordable EVs to make sense. If it ends up in premium small car territory, buyers may simply step up to a larger Chinese SUV. The optimistic take is that Volkswagen has learned. The ID.Polo shows the brand moving back toward things people actually liked about Volkswagen. Recognisable names, practical interiors, good ergonomics and sensible engineering. The hard truth is, Volkswagen has to move quickly. BYD, MG, Chery, GWM, Geely and Leapmotor, they're not waiting around. The affordable EV market is being built now, and if legacy brands arrive too late or too expensive, Australian buyers will have already moved on. The next couple of years will bring a very large wave of hybrids, plug-in hybrids and extended range EVs to Australia. For this show, we are not going to spend time on ordinary non-plug-in hybrids because our focus is full battery electric vehicles, plug-in hybrids and EREVs. But the plug-in side of the pipeline is getting genuinely interesting. First, the Cupra Formentor VZE due sometime in May. This is a plug-in hybrid performance SUV with expected combined output around 200 kilowatts and electric range of more than 100 kilometers depending on final spec. Cupra has always leaned towards sportier tuning and sharper styling, so the Formentor VZE gives buyers a plug-in hybrid option that is not just a soft family SUV. For Australian drivers who commute daily but still want one car for longer trips, a 100 kilometre plus electric range could mean most weekly driving is done without petrol, while the engine remains available for weekends away. Then there is the Forthing Taycan 5, which is expected around June with both battery electric and EREV versions. The EREV version is particularly interesting because it uses a 31.9 kilowatt hour battery, a 120 kilowatt and 240 newton meter electric motor, up to 170 kilometers of pure electric range, and a claimed 1,050 kilometers total range. Again, claimed range needs to be treated carefully, but this is exactly the type of vehicle that could appeal to Australians who like EV driving but are nervous about charging availability on longer routes. The GWM Haval Jolyon Max is expected around the third quarter, and it is important because it should bring electric power into a mainstream GWM SUV nameplate beyond the Aura. Depending on final Australian configuration, the Jolyon Max is expected with electrified options that may include EV and plug-in hybrid power. This is the kind of vehicle that could matter in suburbs because Jolyon buyers are value-focused, family-focused, and reasonably price-sensitive. The Motor 7 is due around mid-year and is expected with a plug-in hybrid system, producing around 255 kilowatts and 525 newton meters. It uses an 18.3 kilowatt hour battery and is expected to offer around 90 kilometers of WLTP electric range. That makes it another strong, electric during the week and petrol for long trips option. A Motor JQ is already building brand awareness here, and a strong plug-in hybrid medium SUV could be very relevant if priced well. Toyota is also finally bringing a RAV4 plug-in hybrid to Australia, expected around the third quarter. This is a big one because the RAV4 is one of Australia's most important SUVs. The plug-in hybrid version has been available overseas for years, and Australian buyers have been asking for it for quite some time. Expected output is around 200 to 220 kilowatts, depending on the final spec, and will almost certainly carry a premium price. However, Toyota has a huge trust advantage in Australia. If the RAV4 plug-in hybrid arrives with a decent supply, it could bring plug-in hybrid tech to buyers who would never have considered a Chinese or European plug-in. The Cooper Leon VE is expected in the second quarter. This is a plug-in hybrid hatch which has around 150 kilowatts and overseas electric range claims around 130 kilometers. It's strong for a smaller performance hatch and gives Cooper another electrified option for people who do not want an SUV. And then Volkswagen's Transporter e-hybrid is also expected around the middle of the year. It pairs a 2.5 litre petrol engine with an electric motor and a 16.5 kilowatt hour battery, producing around 171 kilowatts combined and offering up to 60 kilometres of electric range. For trades, delivery work, shuttles and commercial use, that could be useful if the pricing and payload stacks up. A van that can do local jobs on electric power but still run longer routes without charging downtime may make sense for businesses not ready to go full BEV. The broader point is that plug-in hybrids and EREVs are about to become much more common in Australia. That does not mean they're perfect. A badly used plug-in hybrid can be worse than its promise. If owners never charge them, they're just carrying extra battery weight around while burning petrol. Fleet buyers and novated lease customers need to understand that the savings only appear if the car is actually plugged in regularly. Plug-in hybrids also still have engines, servicing, exhaust systems, and fuel costs. However, when used properly, good plug-in hybrids and EREVs can be effective. A 90 to 170 kilometre electric range covers most daily driving for many Australians. Then the petrol side handles road trips, towing, regional detours, or charger failures. For buyers not ready for full BEV life, these cars can be a stepping stone. The key is honesty. A PHEV is not magic. It's only as clean and cheap as the way it is used. But with bigger batteries, better electric range, and more competition, the next wave of plug-ins and EREVs will be much more useful than the early token plug-in hybrids that only manage 40 or 50 kilometres on a good day. The Australian Electric Vehicle Association has called for a universal levy on vehicles rather than what it describes as a lazy tax on electric cars. This is an important debate because road user charging is not going away. Governments currently raise money through fuel excise. Petrol and diesel drivers pay tax every time they fill up. As more vehicles use less fuel, or no fuel at all, governments will eventually need to find a different way to fund roads. The problem is, how do they do it? An EV-only road user charge sounds simple. Electric cars do not pay fuel excise, so charge them per kilometre. But AEVA argues that this is too narrow and risks punishing people for switching to cleaner vehicles. It could also hit outer suburban and regional drivers hardest because they often drive longer distances and have fewer public transport options. The fuel excise is currently 52.6 cents per litre, although half of it has been suspended temporarily due to the global fuel price pressures. AEVA's argument is that road funding should not be rebuilt by singling out EVs, especially while Australia is still trying to increase EV uptake and reduce fuel dependence. Instead, AEVA suggests a universal charge based on vehicle mass and distance travelled. The logic is that all vehicles use roads, and heavier vehicles cause more road wear. A mass times distance model would mean a heavy vehicle travelling long distances pays more than a light vehicle travelling short distances, regardless of fuel type. That is a more complicated system, but it is arguably fairer. A 2-tonne diesel SUV and a 2-tonne electric SUV both take up space and contribute to road wear. A small, efficient EV does less physical damage than a large truck. If the aim is road maintenance, mass matters. AEVA also argues that fuel excise could remain as a pollution tax. Petrol and diesel users would still pay for the emissions and fuel security cost of burning imported oil, while all road users would contribute to road upkeep in a more technologically neutral way. This is where the debate gets politically tricky. Governments like simple taxes. EV-only road user charges are easy to explain, but they are also easy to get wrong. If introduced too early, they can slow adoption just as EVs are becoming more affordable. If introduced unfairly, they can punish people who are doing the right thing by moving away from petrol and diesel. If introduced without considering vehicle weight, they can treat a small EV hatch the same as a much heavier vehicle doing more road damage. There is also the fuel security angle. Australia imports much of its transport fuel. Every EV charge from local electricity, especially solar, reduces exposure to global oil shocks. That has a value far beyond the household fuel bill. A policy that discourages EV uptake can work against national energy security. That does not mean EV drivers should never pay for roads. Of course they should. Roads have to be funded, and as the vehicle fleet changes, the funding system has to change. But the timing and design matters. A fair road user model should be broad, transparent and technologically neutral. It should not be framed as an EV penalty. It should account for distance, vehicle weight, emissions, regional realities, and the broader public benefit of reducing oil use. The EV transition is hard enough without lazy policy. If Australia wants cleaner transport, lower fuel imports, and fair road funding, it needs a smarter system than electric cars are not paying the fuel excise, so whack 'em first. Zeekr's 8X plug-in hybrid SUV is heading for Australia, and the numbers are frankly ridiculous. This is a large, tech-heavy, luxury-focused plug-in hybrid SUV expected to arrive late 2026 or early 2027. And it sits between the Zeekr 7X and 9X and is aimed at buyers who want the performance and electric driving feel of an EV, but with long-distance petrol backup. One of the versions that will be available uses a 2-litre turbocharged petrol engine and 3 electric motors. Combined output is listed at 1,030 kilowatts and 1,400 newton meters. No, you don't need to go back or adjust your volume. I didn't get that number right. 1,030 kilowatts. 0 to 100 kilometres an hour in about 3 seconds. And a top speed, which is irrelevant, of 230 kilometres per hour. And obviously an all-wheel drive system through a single-speed transmission. The battery is huge for a plug-in hybrid, around 70 kilowatt hours, which is almost as big as my EV5's battery. Estimated real-world range is up to about 240 kilometres, while other earlier details have suggested even higher EV range claims, depending on test cycle and version. In practical terms, that means many owners could drive it like an EV most of the time, then use the petrol engine only on long trips. The vehicle itself is pretty large. It's 5.1 metres long, just under 2 metres wide, and 1.78 metres tall, and it weighs more than 2.5 tonnes. So the performance is even more absurd when you remember that this is not a sports car, it's a big luxury SUV. The interior is properly high-end. The 8X gets 22-inch wheels, powered doors, a deployable rear spoiler, heated, ventilated and massaging seats, twin 16-inch displays, touchscreen climate controls, advanced audio, a drop-down rear entertainment screen, luxury sedan-like rear legroom, and temperature-controlled storage. It is very clearly aimed at premium German SUVs and high-end Chinese rivals rather than basic family transport. The driving impression is more grand tourer than the sharp performance SUV. Estimated Australian pricing is going to be around $135,000, though final pricing is not confirmed. And that puts it well above mainstream plug-in hybrids, but potentially below some European luxury performance SUVs with similar acceleration and far less electric range. I mean, you're coming up, you've got the Volvo EX90, which sits around that price. That's a full battery electric vehicle, so it's going to have some stiff competition. For Australian buyers, the 8X is interesting for a few reasons. Firstly, it shows how plug-in hybrids are changing. This is not an old school PHEV with a tiny battery and 50 kilometres of electric range. A 70 kilowatt hour battery means the 8X can behave like a full EV for normal use. If the owner charges at home, most driving could be electric. The petrol engine becomes a backup, not the main event. Second, it shows how Chinese premium brands are attacking the German luxury market. Zeekr is not trying to undercut only cheap cars. It's going after BMW, Mercedes, Audi, Porsche, Volvo and Genesis with huge performance, big screens, luxury equipment and aggressive pricing. Third, it raises a fair question about complexity. A 2-litre petrol engine, 3 electric motors, a huge battery, luxury electronics, powered doors, air suspension, and advanced driver assistance systems all in one vehicle's a lot. Long-term reliability, parts supply, servicing cost, and support will matter. Australian buyers spending 6 figures will expect premium support, not just a premium spec sheet. The Zeekr 8X is not for everyone. It's a big, heavy, complex, and likely expensive. But as technology showcase, it is a serious statement. It offers the daily electric range many full EVs had only a few years ago, while also delivering long-distance flexibility and performance that would embarrass many sports cars. If Zeekr can support it properly in Australia, the 8X could become one of the more interesting luxury plug-ins on sale here. And that wraps up this mammoth episode of Plugged In Australia. Definitely our longest episode by far. I wanted to do a much more in-depth episode this time to get feedback from some of the listeners. I've had a little bit of feedback with some people asking for a highlights reel. So for similar to the cricket, you don't want to sit there and watch 3 or 4 hours of test cricket or one-day cricket. You like to watch the highlights. What's interesting, what's important. Just get the full story in a short amount of time. So I've had a few comments on some of the platforms. I've had a couple of emails as well, so I really appreciate those people who reached out. And so I will be developing a shorter version, and then this will be the long-form version. So I'm not 100% that every single episode will have a highlights, but that is going to be the aim. I would very much appreciate any feedback you may have on that one as well. And as of course, any feedback on this particular episode, please feel free to let me know. There's a lot of interesting things happening. Tesla Model Y L is starting its deliveries. It's going to have the V2L, as I've mentioned. You've got Leapmotor shaping up as one of the next Chinese brands to watch. You've got Chery's massive brand rollout, which I think is a little bit silly, but hey, that's the way they want to attack it, so let's just see what happens. As always, thank you very much for listening, and until the next time, stay plugged in, stay charged. Ci vediamo.